Today we're going to be coding this JavaScript canvas Starfield warp speed effect. This project took me a little bit of time to figure out, but I really wanted to give you guys a cool beginner project that was right on trend, and along the way you're going to learn some neat tricks about how to use Canvas and how to draw animations on the screen. So as always, let's get coding and pay a bit of tribute to Starfield. So to get this Starfield JavaScript canvas running, we're going to come in here and we're going to set up some basic HTML and CSS first of all. Just put an exclamation mark to get a HTML template started. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Starfield Warp Speed. And then we need to link our style sheet where our CSS file, CSS data is located. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say that's my style sheet. And the reference for that is I've got styles.css, which I've already set up there. So that's all connected. Now, the other thing we're going to need is to link our JavaScript file, which is script, and I've got an index.js up here. So the source is index.js. So we need to put that in there to make sure that's all working. Now, for the actual HTML that goes in here, I need a couple of things. Firstly, we need a container to store everything in so we can modify all of it at once. And the only reason I really have that is so I can center it on the page. So I'm going to do .container to create a div for that. And then we'll go and we're going to do canvas because we want to create a canvas. I'm going to call the canvas warp canvas, just so I've got a name for that. I'm going to make the width 1920 pixels. And I'm actually going to make that a little shorter in height than what you'd often do because I need to sit the cockpit below that because these are basically just two divs sitting on top of each other. It's quite a basic way to do this, but it's nice and easy to understand. So I'm going to make that 800 pixels and then we need to close off that canvas. So beautiful. The other thing we need is the image of the cockpit. So we need an image file. We're going to give that the ID of cockpit, and the source for that will be images, and I think I'm using number 7. I had a few different cockpits that I was trying because I was editing them as I go, and basically number 7 is the one that came out mostly the best, but you could essentially set any image you want in here and modify that to make this look like any sort of spaceship you like, and just put in some alt text. I'm going to call this the Starfield cockpit just because that's good practice. All right, and close that off. And that is all the HTML we need. Now to go into our CSS file, we only need to add a couple of things in here, just to basically to add a black background and make sure everything is centered is the main things. So first of all, we're going to work on our body. So work on the entire thing at once. We're going to do a margin of 0. We're going to do overflow. It's hidden. The reason for that is these stars kind of run off the canvas. So we just want them to disappear at the sides of the canvas and not to keep running. And then we want to make the background black. And the reason for that is because the stars are white. And if there's a white background, you just can't see them at all. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to take the container we just made, which has the canvas and the image in there. And we're going to do display. We're going to do flex because we want it to be able to move into the center of wherever we're going. We're going to do flex direction center, flex direction, my bad, column, because we want to stack those objects. We're going to justify the content to center, and we're going to align items center as well. So basically all this is doing is making the background black, stopping the stars overflowing, and it's actually centering both pieces in the middle of the screen. So if someone moves their screen around, it resizes it. Now this isn't a proper flex item where it's going to shrink and grow with the screen, but you can certainly add that in afterwards. So moving on to our JavaScript file where most of the heavy lifting is done. This is where we build out the actual canvas animation and make the stars and planets appear. So as generally always, we're going to start with a couple of consts. First one I'm going to do is a canvas for the canvas itself, just so we can actually grab that element, and we're going to grab it by its ID, and we called it, what did we call it? Warp canvas. That's what we called it. So we're going to grab that so we can work with that. Now we need another one, which I'm going to call CTX, which is short for context. And then we're going to do canvas.get context. And the context will be 2D. Now what this is saying is basically we want to start working with a canvas that's 2-dimensional. So a flat image essentially. Even though it looks like it's moving in 3D, it's actually a 2D image. Now we need a couple of others. First, we need the number of stars that we want to appear. You can play with this number and do whatever you want with it. I played around and found that 200 was pretty good, but I tried 10,000. You just get this ball of white, but it totally works. And then we need the number of planets we want to appear. Again, you can totally adjust this number. I put it as 5 because it seemed like a reasonable number. You can put it as high as you want, have as many planets as you want, or as few, I should say. And then the last thing we need to set up here with our const is we're going to have some objects and we need somewhere to store them. So we're just going to create an empty array to store those objects in. So pretty straightforward. Now, first thing we need to do, I don't know if you've seen my previous Canvas tutorial, but we're going to set up a random color generator. And this is working on the planets that create. So it randomly gives each of them a color at the start. And so we want to set up an RGB color range. So we're going to set up an R, which we're going to do math.floor because we want a rounded number, math.random. So it randomly selects a number up to 255 because it's 0 to 255 for the color range. And then we're going to add 1 to that just to make sure that all works as we hope it does. Now I'm just going to copy paste those because we need 1 for G and then we need 1 for B. B. Then we need to put all that together into a string that gets returned as an RGB value. So we're going to do backticks here. We're going to do RGB. We're going to open a bracket because that's what we normally do if we typed an RGB number. Then here we're going to put our R value. Then we're going to put our G value, and then we're going to put our B value. So it's going to return in here. It's going to return a random number from each of these, and eventually it's going to say RGB, for instance, 25548, for instance. So next up, what we want to do is we want to initialize the stars. So we've got to get them running. Now, because we set up here, we want 200 of them. We want to go through and create an object for each of those that we're going to store up in this array. So we're going to set up a loop so that we can go through each one and set up an object for that. And we're going to I equals 0, pretty standard loop. I is less than num stars because we have num stars out here. And then each time the loop goes through, we want it to increase 1, so I++. And inside there, what we're going to do, we're going to get our objects array, our objects, can't type today, objects array up here, and we're going to push some information into that. And what we're going to push into that, we're going to push in our new object that we're creating. Now, what do we want inside this object? Well, what we want an X value, and that's going to be the canvas width. So however wide that canvas is divided by 2. And the reason we divide these by 2, and we're going to do our Y value, I'll just put this one in, divided by 2. Now the reason we do divided by 2 here is what it does, it takes the canvas width and halves it so it comes right to the center. So the X value is now in the center. The same with the canvas height, we've got the X value coming to the center because we want all those stars coming out of the center so they look like they're moving away from the center and around the spaceship. So by dividing by 2, we actually center those. Just fix up my comma there. And next up, we want our radius, which we're going to do math.random times 2. And basically what that's giving us is a random number between 0 and 2. And that's why I've got the 2 there. And then we're going to do the angle of those stars, the angle that they're moving on as they fly out. And again, we're doing math.random because we want this whole thing to just look like a random bunch of stars. And we're going to times that by math.pi. And we're going to times that by 2. What this is doing, it's actually multiplying this random number by pi and then by 2, which is giving us a number essentially between 0 and 2 pi. And that's the full degree of radians, which is essentially a circle. So basically these can go out on any angle within a complete circle. And now we need speed, which you can probably imagine. I'm going to do random again because I like a bit of random, and we're doing times 2 so that it's a random number between 0 and 2 once again. And then the type, because we're going to give these a name so that we can differentiate them later. These are stars, so I'm just going to call this a star. And that will be the end of that object. So basically what's happening here, it's going through these, 200 times. It's giving each one an X value and a Y value in the center. It's setting a radius. So this, essentially, I should have mentioned the size of that star, but we only want to be small. You can adjust this number. It's giving them the angle that they move out on and the speed that they move out on, and labeling them as star, and that's that object. Now we need to do the same thing with the planets essentially. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take this whole section and we're going to do initialize the planets, and then we need to update this to num planets, so that it knows to run through the same number of times as the planets here. We're going to push in there the same thing. We're going to push in, we want them to come out of the center, we want it to be random. We're going to change this though, the radius, because we want the planets to be bigger than the stars. We're going to do times 10, so a number between 0 and 10, and then we're going to add 5 to that. Now you can adjust these numbers as much as you want. You can play around with them, make planets bigger, smaller, change these numbers around, changes the randomness of that sizing. Now the angle's the same. We want them to come out on random angles, so that's all the same. We want a slower speed for the planets, so we just put a smaller number here. Again, you can play with these numbers, make them quicker or slower. And we need to give these objects a name as well, so we're going to call them planet. So essentially all that data is also going to get pushed into this array. Now what it's going to do in a minute is it's going to know which is which by looking through and finding if the type is planet or the type is star, and that's why this term's so important. Okay, so we've initialized our stars, we've initialized our planet objects, we've pushed them all into this array here, we've given them random colors. Now we need to draw them on the screen. This is where things get cool. So we're going to set up a function. We're going to call that function draw. That seems like a good thing to call it. First of all, what we need to do is we just need to clear rect. So essentially what we're doing is we're just going to completely clear the canvas that we've created. And this is pretty straightforward. We just want to do the X value, a Y value, the canvas width, and the canvas height. We're saying clear anything within this area. Now, what we need to do next is actually loop through this array we've created and pull out all the values. So for let I equal 0, I is less than objects dot length, and then I plus plus, and then inside here what we're going to have is we're going to create a const called object, and in that object each time it loops through we're going to get it to store the object from the array and the object number. Now for each of these we want it to pull out an X value, or we want it to create a new X value, sorry, to print on the screen, and that X value is going to be based on the object X value was allocated up here, which initially was at the center of the screen. And then each time it prints this, because it's actually running through this over and over, we want it to get that position and add on, write this one out for you, object, the angle of the object with math.cos, and the times it by the object speed. So essentially what this phrase is doing, it's going, I need a new X value to print for this object. I'm going to take the X value that's up here, wherever it is at this point in time. I'm going to add on math.cos time with the object angle and the object speed, and that goes where it is now. I want you to move it essentially on this much of an angle at this much of a speed outwards from that point. So this initially starts at the center because we've said to do canvas height divided by 2, but then it adds this on and slowly moves them out from the center, and that's how these appear to be moving. Now we also need to do the same thing naturally, the Y value. So we just update each of these to Y because that's already stored up here. All right, and with these, we are going to create an if statement. And the reason we're doing this if statement is to work out if that new position is actually off the canvas, because if they've gone off the canvas, we want them to reset and go again. So if this X value that we've created just up here, let me think about this. If this X value is less than 0, or X is greater than the canvas width, or the Y value is less than 0, basically if it's back at the center is what the 0 is doing, or the Y value is greater than the canvas height. So is it at the center, or has it gone out of bounds? Then I want you to do this. I want you to get that that object X value, and I want you to reset it to the canvas width divided by 2, because as we mentioned earlier, when we start them here, what that's doing is it's actually dividing the canvas width in half and saying to put it back to the center. And then we also want you to reset the Y value to 2 as well. So it's going, if it's gone outside the boundaries of the canvas, or if for some reason it's past the center, like it's less than 0, reset it back to the center of the canvas. And we'll also need to do the same thing with the angle. We want to reset the angle and pick a new random angle for that object, times math.pi times 2, because basically it's giving us a full circle to decide which angle that star should come out on next to create a bit of randomness. If for some reason it's, well, not if for some reason, most of them won't be outside the canvas boundary, then the object's X value can remain as whatever this new X value was decided here, and the object's Y value can remain as the Y value that was decided here. So it basically goes, is it outside the boundary? No, it can go back and update its position. Oh no, it's gone outside the boundary, reset its position back to the center of the canvas. Now, we actually need to print these on the canvas now. So we do our CTX. We're going to do begin path, and begin path, whereas this was clearing the canvas here, this is basically saying, I want you to draw a new object. I want you to start drawing a new object. If the object type equals star, now this is where this comes important, how we actually allocated them a type of star up here as their object, or a planet. So it's going, if it's a star, this is what we want you to do. We want you to draw context arc, which is drawing a circle. It's saying, I want you to draw a circle. We want you to draw a circle with the object's X value, the object's Y value, the object's radius value. We want no rotation because we don't need it. It's a circle. And we need to do math.pi times 2 to get the full circle of radians around the outside. And that will draw a complete circle based on the X and Y value that were all allocated up here. Now, what it's doing though, it's actually only drawing the outside of the circle. What we then need to do is take our context and we need to tell it to fill that in, basically like bucket fill. And we're going to do the fill style, and we're going to make our fill style white. So these are going to be white stars. We've set the background to black with the CSS, but you could change these to black stars. You could make that a white background. You could probably put a random color generator in here actually, and actually have randomly colored stars coming out, which actually could look pretty cool. And then else if, so if for some reason it's not a star, but the object type equals planet, because we set up here type planet. And on that note, you could probably draw spaceships, have type spaceship. You could have some cool other things in here. You honestly could. We want to draw circles again, because we actually want to draw the planets as circles. And we're going to take the X value. We're going to take the Y value. We're going to take, the object's radius value. We don't want any rotation. And we want to draw a full circle again, math.pi times 2 to draw a full circle. So it's drawing the full border of that based on the numbers from here, which are a little bigger than the ones from here. So the radius will actually be bigger. The circles will be bigger overall. And that's how we can kind of tell they're planets. And as before, we need to fill them in. But we're going to fill them in with the random color that we generated earlier. So object.color, which is allocated in, oh geez, we have not allocated that. We just need to put a new object in here. We need to do color, and that color is going to be our random color generator function up here. Random color. So what that's going to do is, as it goes through the planet, it's going to go up here and generate a random color and allocate that as the object here. And then down here, it's going to take that random color and draw that on the canvas for the planet. Good pickup that we got that just then. All right. And then last of all, for this function, we need to do CTX fill just to draw all of them on the canvas. Every time it comes through, we want it to fill that canvas. And then the last step inside here is we actually need to use request animation frame. So it's basically saying we want it to get the next one in line, and we're going to insert in there draw. Then finally, we need to run this whole function. So it's going to come back up here and it's going to run this whole, run this whole function from here, loop it over and over, and then get the next frame, loop over, get the next frame, loop over for each of these 200 stars and 5 planets. And that's how they appear to be moving. It's actually slowly animating them over time. Okay, so that's all the code. So basically, last thing we need to now is run this. We run this in my live server. Just go over to my full screen mode so you can see that. Oh, well, it's working. We've got things drawing on the screen, but they're all going in the same directions on the same angles. Now, what this says to me is that basically the X and the Y value are getting allocated to the same thing, and they're just all going to the same place. So if we go back over to the code, it's going to be somewhere in the draw function, because obviously they're getting drawn okay. And the X is getting drawn at math.cos, and then the Y is getting drawn. So basically these two values are actually getting drawn with the same angle and speed here. So we just need to update the Y, the sign, error on my part. If I go back to my full screen again, check that out. There we go. Bingo. Now they're all going off in random directions. And what you can see is they look like they're shooting out of the center, because it's going, when they've hit the edge here, the if else we put in, if they've gone outside the boundary, reset them back to the center. So essentially it takes, say, this star, and this star will get to the edge over here. And once it does, it's going to go, all right, reset that back to here. And that star would have got a new random value here and came out from the center. We've got our planets in random colors. As they go off the boundaries, they change colors as well. So it's pretty darn cool. Now, just to give an example of things that are easy to change, you can change a few things in here. If we go up and change the number of stars, for instance, to 10,000, and maybe we'll make the number of planets 50. So we should have 50 randomly colored planets now and 10,000 stars. I'll go over to our full screen view again. You can see it's running a lot slower because it's trying to draw a frame for each of those. But there we have 10,000 stars, pretty much a solar flare. And then we've got these 50 planets in random colors coming out from the center. But the same thing will happen once they get to the center, with the edge, sorry. They're actually going to start flaring out from the middle again. It actually looks kind of pretty cool. Now, one really cool thing I did find, if you want to make your stars or your planets flicker, is you actually add the random color generator into the animation loop. So every time it goes through, it changes a new color. Now, it's going to be doing a lot of work to do that. But in saying that, let's change these back to 200. We'll change this back to 5. So instead of picking a random color initially with the object, what you can do is you can go down here, and where it's giving it the thing, you can put in the random color generator function here. So every time this runs through, it adds a random color. And we can do the same thing with the stars. Every time it runs through, it's allocating it a new random color. And go back to full screen view. Now, it's a bit of overkill, but you can see the planets are flickering because they're constantly changing colors. But it actually shows you that these are reprinting frames every time. It's a good way to see this. But all the stars are actually flickering as well. So they're just some cool things you can try. You can update colors, you can update numbers, you can update speeds. You can honestly update a lot of things in this code, and it will just run really well. So that's our JavaScript, Canvas, Starfield tutorial. Only a little bit of HTML and CSS in there, but it gives you a really good feel for some of the cool things you can do with Canvas. There's some amazing things that people are doing. It's very timely. Starfield, if you haven't played it, great game. But before you go and play it, make sure you watch some more of my videos. And if you got some value from this one, be sure to like and subscribe and click the little bell next to that to get notified when there's more coming out. I've got more tutorials coming your way. Peace out.